On a quiet morning, Meg walked nervously into the retirement home. She straightened her shirt, took a deep breath, and knocked softly. "Mrs. Parkhurst," she said with a practiced smile, "I'm Meg, your new student volunteer." The old woman squinted through her glasses and muttered, "Oh, you must be my new student volunteer." Meg sighed internally. She had literally just said that. Mrs. Parkhurst leaned closer. "What's your name, dear?" Meg resisted the urge to roll her eyes. "It's Meg." Across town, Peter was dealing with one of his usual misadventures. He was harsh but not untruthful, someone remarked after Cleveland Jr.'s pants arrived from a company that apparently specialized in grill covers. Meanwhile, Stewie strutted confidently through the Griffin's house after being invited over. "Quite a place you've got here," he said with theatrical flair. "Your mother seemed nice." "Yeah," Chris replied, shrugging. "I've only met her a couple of times, but yeah." Lois's name echoed dramatically through the house as Peter repeatedly shouted it for no real reason. Meanwhile, somewhere in a loud office, a man shouted into the phone, "Buy, sell, buy," as if he actually understood the stock market. "Wow, buying and selling," someone whispered, completely mesmerized by nonsense. In another absurd subplot, a casting discussion was underway. "We have the sixth build guy from the Avengers," someone said. "You know, the arrow guy who frowns a lot. Does he look like Bourne?" "Yeah, sort of like a young Popeye." "Then he's perfect." At school, students barely looked up from their phones as the teacher tried to announce the election results. "Children, a man is talking," the teacher begged in vain. At the same time, Joe learned a piece of news that sent him into panic. His father was coming to visit. The problem? His father didn't know he was paralyzed. Peter, being Peter, decided the solution was simple: hide the wheelchair. Elsewhere, Peter tried to keep himself calm by going to his happy place. Someone reminded Meg she was only one number away from bingo, and a random guy in a gym informed a short, muscular man, "The more muscular you get, the shorter you look." Meanwhile, getting a jet ski license turned out to be easier than expected, mostly because the only test question was about fighting your stepdad. At makeout point, a couple was making bad decisions despite warnings of a killer on the loose. "Is that all you ever think about, Richie?" the girl sighed. "What about the murderer?" But of course, Richie didn't care. Back at the Griffin house, Peter opened the door to a city councilwoman. "Hello," she greeted confidently. "I'm City Councilwoman Rosario Vargas. Quahog doesn't work if it doesn't work for all of us." Peter just stared and commented, "That's a beautiful pantsuit." Meanwhile, Meg ruined broccoli for everyone by insisting they weren't little trees. Peter awkwardly greeted Quagmire and his transgender mother, and Lois regretted her shoe choice at a big event. In a different plotline, Peter pretended to be an investor, and Chris surprised everyone by showing up somewhere in dramatic fashion. Later, a disastrous Spirit Air flight involved Quagmire giving the gang a tour of the plane. Hudson News was, as usual, just a cover for Peter pretending to be important. Somewhere, a dead man was found, his face and earlobes eaten off by a cat. Brian and Stewie, meanwhile, had an awkward conversation in Stewie's hive, where he proudly stated there were exactly 4,000 bees. Later, Stewie offered Brian a shared room and suggested watching a questionable film. Peter, as usual, ruined someone's big moment, this time at a Sword in the Stone ceremony. Lois overheard a woman canceling her husband's life insurance so she could travel. And elsewhere, a magician's assistant scene went horribly wrong when the volunteer refused to wiggle their toes. Peter continued his antics in Fenway Park's locker room while pretending to be powerful by handing out his credit card instead of cash. Meanwhile, Lois was not a baseball fan at all, and Peter insisted on being confused for at least the first 4 minutes of every shower. The school board gathered for an emergency meeting after Principal Shepard's meltdown. Somewhere else, Brian got roasted when someone compared Lois's past lovers to Volvos with a couple of blowouts. Lois found out Peter might have lied about a child, prompting Quagmire and others to panic. A pilot casually joked about being in the full, upright, and locked position. Peter mocked a one-page script, and a doctor reminded Lois about Stewie's overdue vaccinations. A shirt cannon malfunctioned, a frog reporter showed up, Chris wanted a trampoline, and Peter got stuck in a holiday mall crowd. Meanwhile, Chris was convinced Arthur Valentine was real, and Lois and Peter had a hilariously passive-aggressive fight about who steps on the creaky board at night. Romantic tension was fake and overdramatic. Boiled beef was the highlight of a wedding menu. Peter and the guys pretended to be veterans until Quagmire admitted he was the only real one. A strange montage of dog exhaling, sad couch moments, and Peter riding Fleek followed. The gang hacked a computer with the password, but I lost the receipt and discovered a plane ticket. Peter got knocked out, woke up to a paramedic named Striker Fox, and instantly got a sarcastic text from Lois about dinner. Meanwhile, Peter felt sorry for himself, again, while Brian gave him a speech. Natalia revealed she was sent to neutralize someone named Fial Moskovitz. Stewie got tangled up in absurd conversations, and Lois had to diffuse jealousy between two women. In a flashback, the gang remembered their Star Wars parody. Peter bragged about being on Fleek, Quagmire awkwardly hit on a girl who just turned 18, and Lois taught Peter how to text like a middle-aged woman. Peter refused to throw anything away, clinging to every piece of junk that sparked joy. Corey from Corey's World promised to make Meg an influencer, much to her horror. Peter got paged, yes, paged. Someone nominated him for mayor, and absurd chaos erupted during a town hall. The episodes spiraled through dramatic reveals, musical interludes, awkward flirtations, sword fights, shirt cannons, city council speeches, bad airline tours, and Peter's unshakable stupidity. In the end, Lois sighed, Meg rolled her eyes, Brian exhaled through his nose, and Peter was just Peter. On a strangely quiet morning in Quahog, a city that never truly understood the concept of normal, Meg Griffin nervously adjusted the strap of her messenger bag. The retirement home loomed ahead like an overcooked casserole, warm but uninviting. She stood at the door for a moment, took a deep breath, and whispered to herself, "Okay, Meg, you got this." The smell of old carpet, mystery soup, and cheap disinfectant hit her the moment she stepped inside. The receptionist barely looked up from her crossword puzzle, waving vaguely toward the west wing. Meg followed the linoleum tiles until she reached a room that had a gold-plated sign reading MRS. "Parkhurst, no loud people." She knocked lightly. "Oh, you must be my new student volunteer," croaked Mrs. Parkhurst, peering at Meg over her oversized glasses. Meg forced a smile. "Yes, ma'am, I just said that. I'm Meg." "What's your name, dear?" the woman repeated. Meg blinked twice. This was going to be a long day. Meanwhile, across town, Peter Griffin had decided that his morning mission would be to prove to his family he could be responsible. His version of responsibility, of course, involved sitting on the couch in his tighty-whities, yelling stock market phrases into a plastic toy phone. "Buy, sell, buy, buy," he screamed at no one in particular, as Brian and Stewie watched with the tired expressions of creatures who had seen too much. Lois walked in with her coffee. "Peter, what are you doing?" Peter puffed out his chest. "Making investments, Lois. You wouldn't understand. It's Wall Street stuff. Business. Big money." Brian raised an eyebrow. "You're holding a Fisher-Price phone, Peter." Peter stared at the toy, then back at Brian. And, in another corner of Quahog, Meg's patience was being tested to Olympian levels. Mrs. Parkhurst refused to play bingo because she insisted Meg was too loud, despite Meg not having spoken for 5 whole minutes. "You're only one number away from bingo," Meg said hopefully. "Shh, don't rush destiny, child," Mrs. Parkhurst replied dramatically. Meg sat back, wondering how her life had ended up here. Meanwhile, at Spooner Street, Cleveland Jr. showed off a new pair of pants that looked suspiciously like grill covers. "They're practical," he insisted. Peter snorted. "Yeah, if your grill wants to go to prom." That afternoon, Lois was preparing for a city council visit. She had barely zipped up her skirt when Peter came barreling through the house yelling, "Lois! Lois!" Lois clenched her teeth. "Peter, what?" "Nothing," he said, shrugging and walking away. Later, the Griffins received a surprise knock at the door. A sharp-looking woman in a dark pantsuit introduced herself. "Hello. I'm City Councilwoman Rosario Vargas. Quahog doesn't work if it doesn't work for all of us." Peter, with his best fake charm, replied, "That's a beautiful pantsuit." She blinked, unsure whether to say thank you or call security. Meanwhile, Chris was at school pretending to study while actually doodling robots on his notebook. The teacher tapped the board and begged, "Children, a man is talking." No one listened. Not even Chris, who was currently imagining a battle between a robot walrus and a mutant hamburger. At the same moment, Joe Swanson received news that nearly made him drop his coffee. His father was visiting. The problem? His dad didn't know Joe was paralyzed. Panic set in like a bad Wi-Fi connection. Peter, being Peter, came up with the perfect solution. Joe, just stand up. Peter, I can't stand up, Joe shouted. Peter nodded. Exactly. That's why it's such a great surprise. Elsewhere, Stewie proudly led Brian into his newly built hive. This is where I keep my 4,000 bees, he said like a Bond villain giving a tour. Brian stepped back. Stewie, why? Because, Stewie whispered, power. The day got weirder. Quagmire gave the gang a tour of a Spirit Airlines flight. Here's the first-class section, he said, pointing to a single folding chair duct taped to the wall. Peter clapped like a tourist at a bad magic show. At the mall, Peter got stuck in a Christmas crowd. Lois, help! It's like Black Friday, but with worse hygiene. Meanwhile, Chris developed an intense belief in Arthur Valentine, writing him a letter that started, Dear mysterious Candyman, please bring me chocolate and a girlfriend. Lois and Peter fought late at night about who stepped on the creaky floorboard. Peter, that was you, Lois hissed. Peter gasped dramatically. Me? Lois, how dare you accuse the man who once fixed the VCR clock? At a school assembly, Meg volunteered to help decorate for the winter dance. No one noticed. She stapled glittery snowflakes to the wall in silence, pretending the quiet was comforting instead of crushing. Peter showed up midway through the event, dressed as Santa's hot cousin, handing out candy canes and unsolicited advice about investing in jet skis. Later that night, Brian found Peter sitting on the front steps, looking defeated. Lois said my ideas are stupid, Peter muttered. Brian sighed. Peter, your ideas usually are stupid. Peter nodded. But they're mine. Brian almost felt bad, almost. Stewie spent the evening trying to teach Peter how to text like a modern man. Peter, he explained slowly, no one uses ellipses after every sentence. It makes you sound like a creepy old man. Peter typed, Hey, what's up? Wanna hang? Stewie threw the phone out the window. Meanwhile, Lois discovered Peter might have a secret child. Quagmire spit out his drink. A what? Peter shrugged. I mean, it's possible. I've done a lot of dumb things, some of them in Canada. In a bizarre twist, Peter got nominated for mayor after shouting free sandwiches for everyone at a town meeting. The crowd went wild. Lois pinched the bridge of her nose. Peter, you can't actually do that. Peter grinned. Lois, I can't do a lot of things, but that's never stopped me before. As the week dragged on, Quahog plunged into its usual rhythm of chaos. Meg's awkward encounters, Stewie's evil plans, Peter's idiocy, Lois's frustration, and Brian's sarcasm. Mrs. Parkhurst continued to forget Meg's name. Joe pretended to stand. Quagmire dated someone wildly inappropriate, and Chris was still waiting for Arthur Valentine. Through it all, one thing remained constant: Peter's ability to create disaster out of absolutely nothing. He was the storm and the calm, the problem and the punchline. And in Quahog, that was exactly how life was supposed to be.